let's now get into UBI. You and I initially connected over universal basic income, something I've been covering for years at this point. I'm a supporter of UBI. The devil is in the details, as is often the case. So I think this is a good opportunity to talk about some of the questions that there are around how you would structure it. You call it the freedom dividend. You're talking about $1,000 a month for all Americans, not means tested. Is that a good general overview of how you see the proposal?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. So the questions that have come up are around the idea of replacing existing welfare benefits with UBI. So, for example, someone who might be getting $300 worth of food stamps per month already would, if I understand correctly, only get 700 of the thousand maximum dollars that would be available under the freedom dividend. Is that an accurate understanding as well?
That's generally correct. The freedom dividend is meant to be opt-in, but if you opt in, then you're saying, look, I prefer this to the $300 that I'm getting. So in that particular case, that would be right.
So my concern with that is the following. I've always thought that one of the primary goals of UBI should be to raise the standard of living for as many people as possible in a way that makes a difference in their lives, which I think is an important part of it. And so what concerns me about the way I think you've outlined the plan, and of course you'll have an opportunity to tell me if I'm misunderstanding it, is that
Sure.
if someone is extraordinarily wealthy without the means testing, they get an additional $1,000 a month. If someone is already receiving $1,000 a month of welfare benefits on the basis that their income qualifies them, those would be simply replaced dollar for dollar with your $1,000 freedom dividend. So in practice, you could have something which I agree should not be means tested. I'm completely with you there, but that ends up giving rich people who don't need an extra $1,000 a month $1,000 and leaving people already on welfare with 1,000 from UBI instead of 1,000 from other programs.
Yeah, and so there are a few elements to this, David. The first is that I want to fund this with a value added tax that would end up harvesting a lot of money from that person at the very top of the pyramid. Because right now, and if you look at the person at the very tippy top, someone like Jeff Bezos, he's worth $160 billion, and Amazon paid zero in federal taxes last
Sure.
year.
Okay.
So my plan would generate literally billions of dollars from Amazon by giving the American people a slice of every Amazon transaction and every Google search and every Facebook ad and every robot truck mile. And then this would be the net. We would end up harvesting literally billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars from Jeff Bezos. So if we then send him $1,000 a month to remind him that he's an American, then, like, especially as you say, there are many benefits to not means testing it. So the goal is to destigmatize this program and say, look, this is a new right of citizenship. It's just like in Alaska, everyone gets it. Like, we're not going to monitor you. We're not going to keep track of changes in circumstances. We're not going to make this a rich to poor transfer. But the net effect is that it does end up getting money from the people that are in position to benefit the most from our society. So that's the first big thing, is that the funding mechanism ends up making it so that the wealthy who are great at, frankly, avoiding income taxes end up paying their fair share.
Well, I want to talk about the VAT tax specifically, so I'm glad you mentioned it, and we'll get to that. I still can't get away from the reality, though, that if you currently have $1,000 a month in welfare benefits that you're receiving, the freedom dividend goes into play, and they still get just that same $1,000. I'm unsure how those individuals are benefiting if they're just swapping $1,000 from a couple of programs for $1,000 from the freedom dividend. What about those individuals? Are they better off?
Yeah, so there are at least three ways in which they're better off.
Okay.
So the first is that a lot of the existing programs have monitoring and requirements. You have a case manager, and so if you said, look, you can have $1,000, no questions asked, that's actually an improvement for the person in that situation.
It saves
many,
them
many
time,
cases.
so to speak. They don't have to
Yeah.
continually verify that they continue to qualify for the program.
Yes, and another advantage to that too is that right now that there are some games playing going on where, it's like you can't report anything past a certain level or else your benefits are reduced. So one, your reporting goes down. Two, the incentives change. Three, there's no stigma because now everyone's getting it, and like there's no negative association. And the fourth thing is that in many cases, these people have children. That if they have children, and as soon as a child turns 18, that child starts getting $1,000 a month. That is a game changer. And I'm a parent, as you can tell. And so if you're a parent and you know that your children will start receiving $1,000 a month at age 18, that's an enormous burden that's lifted. If you are a parent, which in many cases there's a young person in the family, that when they become 18, this would be an enormous change in circumstances.
So let's talk about the funding mechanism a little bit. And you and I have not talked about this before. You talked about the VAT tax, a value added tax. And the idea would be really rich people like Jeff Bezos, as you mentioned, are going to, he can reduce his wages significantly and avoid paying income tax on wages. Capital gains taxes are low. So the VAT tax is a way to actually get more money in a more difficult to avoid way from somebody like Jeff Bezos. My concern is that VAT taxes are notorious for, on a percentage basis, being overwhelmingly borne by poor people rather than rich people. And I'll explain what I mean by that, just so it's clear to the audience. When you are a very wealthy person and a VAT tax is placed on your consumption, it's true that in terms of the number of dollars, you are likely going to pay significantly more dollars in terms of a VAT tax than a poor person. But because the poor person has a much higher, what's called marginal propensity to consume, they are more likely to need every last dollar they have to fund their more meager lifestyle. On a percentage basis, the poor person pays more of their income to the VAT tax than the very rich person. That seems to run counter to the goals of your proposal. Am I missing something about how VAT taxes work in practice?
No, you are largely correct. And the way that we can amend this is that VAT taxes and other parts. So first, we're the only advanced economy in the world right now that does not have a VAT value-added tax.
True.
Because as you say, they're much, much more efficient at getting the revenue from the Jeff Bezoses of the world, who are expert at not paying a whole lot of income tax. But in other countries as well, they have value-added taxes that are effectively higher on luxury goods that get consumed by people of greater means, and lower or even total exemptions on consumer staples that are consumed by the poor. So you're 100% correct that in a vacuum, a value-added tax ends up being a bigger burden on someone with less money, because it's like that incremental cost is a bigger deal if you are living on a fixed income than if you're swimming in money. But there are ways to make the value-added tax less burdensome on the people with the least, and that would be the plan. And other countries, again, have already done this.
How do you do that? Do you exempt certain spending from the VAT tax?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, you just exempt various consumer staples that working class Americans end up spending more of their income on. And the trade-off then is you get less money, which is fine, because to me, the goal with the VAT is to go where the money is, not where the money isn't, if you know what I mean. But yeah, you could exempt various consumer staples, and then you get less revenue, but that would be the plan.
So in essence, it becomes more of a luxury VAT tax, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.